Welcome to First Builders, the podcast for those who shape companies from the ground up. I'm Amber Illig, founder and general partner of the Council Capital. Previously, I worked at the intersection of technology and physical operations like manufacturing and transportation.
And I'm Rachel Choi, partner at the Council, with a background in life sciences and health tech. On this podcast, Amber and I highlight those who don't just join companies, they help build them from the ground up.
Whether founders or early team members, First Builders have created functions, teams, and processes from scratch, tackling the toughest phases of growth. They don't just work at great companies, they join in the formative years and help define them. And it often leads them to even more exciting work down the road.
And today's guest is someone with an incredible track record in tech, Rohini Pandhi, head of expansion at Mercury. Rohini is a serial operator and established product leader in fintech. She's joined hyperscale companies like Square, now known as Block, and Mercury in the relatively early days. She also angel invests and advises many startups, including those in the Council Funds portfolio. She's here to share her thought process that has led to an incredible career and tactical advice for early stage founders attempting to build best-in-class products and teams.
Rohini, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just dive right in and start from the beginning. Nowadays, you're well known as a top product and fintech leader, but I think and early on in your career, you had both big company and startup experiences. How did those early career experiences kind of shape who you are today as a leader?
Oh, interesting. I think in the early days, I gravitated towards a little bit of everything, which is probably what excited me the most about startups, being a generalist. I mean, I remember as a kid, I was building my own software. I think my first actual piece of code was building like a barcode inventory management system for my uncle, who's a dentist. And so he could like just scan things out, put things back in. And I just wanted to learn how to do that. And then, going to school and then having like different work experiences. I was a consultant for a little while. I did phone sales for a little while. I did customer support for a little while, learned about different kind of research and like UXR work. Then went and got my MBA in finance and loved just like learning about spreadsheet modeling. And so I think I just really liked trying everything. And so when kind of product became a thing, it was really an interesting kind of Venn diagram of the things that I really loved with tech, but then also how to build businesses. And so I think it shaped me as a leader in the way that I can empathize with what I'm asking for from my team at a very like kind of broad level. I've done a little bit of CS before. And so when I ask for CS support on something, it feels like, yeah, I'm not just saying that as a kind of like external outsider, but I'm really understanding what their day-to-day is and the pressures and stress that they have. And so adding more onto that is really, the empathy goes a long way. And then I think it's also probably recognizing what you don't know. I think we've worked for people who might not recognize that or have a little bit of a higher ego when it comes to those kinds of things. And so I really respected and admired leaders that just had those questions to their team, realized when they were working with subject matter experts and leaned on them, especially in the roles where I've had the privilege of like working with subject matter experts. It's been really nice to use them and say, yes, I've done a spreadsheet model or sensitivity model before, but you're a finance person. Could you help me out with this and make sure that I haven't made some dumb mistakes? And I really think through what does this mean for the business? How do I think about the output of something like this and just have it be a team effort rather than me putting something together that might be fine, but not great.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It feels like your early career experiences of always being a sort of lifelong learner and dabbling with different spaces allowed you to have a lot of credibility with people nowadays.
Totally.
Being able to make for first passes on things and then actually understand what you're asking for. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I always love kind of like that path of like that generalist to be able to become then like building the foundation, right, for everything else that you have from that. I'm curious, like, with all of these different companies that you worked at, including some of the high profile ones later towards your career, was there one role that really kind of like opened up kind of those future opportunities for you in terms of like the learning or the credibility?
Probably Square, quite honestly. I think I got the most velocity of learning from that experience. I'd been working at smaller startups before then. I'd started my own things as well, but I think there was it's like when you're doing things on your own, it's great because you get that experience of doing it and like implementing something, falling on your face. You have like that school of hard knocks, immediate kind of the learning loop, I guess, is a lot faster. But when I think about the velocity of learning, it came from Square because you just are working with amazing, talented folks that you're kind of watching. And how do they do this? I like that, how they kind of communicated this piece of it. I liked how they handled this piece of it. And you just kind of take the best of, because you're just watching folks and maybe getting things just from like subconsciously, just gaining those ideas and thoughts of how you should think about your work as well. And I think when you work with really ambitious, talented people, they push you to work for to your best performance too. So I always thought about it as like playing tennis with somebody a little bit better than me. It makes my game better. And so that's what I loved about working at a place with a bunch of different product people that were incredible on their own.
Yeah, I love that, right? Like, being kind of like that, the rising tide that lifts all boats type of philosophy,
exactly.
Right? Like when you're with people that you're like, okay, I want to be like that. I want to learn from that and take the best from all of that as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then I think a lot of people kind of seek out experiences like that, like being able to jump into a pool of talent that is just kind of, constantly pushing you to be better, and a company that's constantly growing and asking for more. And I looked back, and you joined Square around 2016, and it looks like the company had just gone through an IPO. And they already had 1.7 billion in revenue. So by some standards, they were already successful. However, if you look at them today, like as of last year, I think they grew to almost 22 billion in revenue. And so they've done very well. So I'm curious, like, if there's any advice you can give to folks who are maybe, 10 years earlier trying to find that sort of breakout experience. What stuck out to you about Square and made you want to take that role?
Yeah, I think Square was unique in that I think it was, well, the people that I mentioned. You want to work with great people that are going to make you better at what you do. The people that all like, I have a rule where if smart engineers, smart designers, talented individuals are going somewhere to a new business, just follow. I'm sure they got something going. They're cooking up something that's really good. And so I think the people really mattered to me. The talent really mattered to me. And even after IPO, folks weren't like leaving ship. They were like, there's more work to do. And so that was really like positive, I guess, reinforcement for me. I think the business and the ethos of the business also were a big part of my decision. I personally, growing up with my dad was an entrepreneur, like the SMB focus was something that really resonated with me, and how tech could be used to drive the mission of economic empowerment was just something that I could get behind. And I'm like, yeah, I can build products that serve that base. I understand who the customer is, understand the pain points and how cute those pain points can be when you're starting up a new business. And so that was something that I'm like, okay, that's a good fit right there. And then I think the third thing is to think about the opportunity for you. At that time, there was just a fantastic opportunity for me to build something that was still relatively small in the Square ecosystem. It was a Hack Week project called Square Invoices that just did really well. But there was 3 engineers, myself, and 1 designer. And so just having that opportunity, kind of like a small little team that's going to go do big things, and having that challenge was actually exciting for me, not scary. And so that was something that I really wanted to have, was the opportunity to lead something like that. So Square really just kind of checked all those boxes. And then I think, like, as you think about what's going to be the rocket ship, it's really part of those 3 things are usually there in any company that's growing at that pace. There's really good opportunities. The business is really strong and has a clear focus, and the people are incredibly talented. And so I wouldn't worry too much about what that upside is or how you're doing the calculations when you're evaluating companies like that. There's upside if you have the right people focused on the right things to go work on.
Totally.
Yeah. Totally agreed. And it's very similar to kind of what we discuss at the council too, when we think about like the term first builders and, these folks like yourself, that are like really thinking about not just joining a company, but helping create it and creating that story as well from day one. Yeah. I'm curious if that's like something that you've thought about as well, like in terms of that responsibility, or kind of like taking that on for yourself as well.
In terms of like the creation of that.
Yeah.
Like the components.
Yep. Yeah. The creation of that, and creation of like the story and the vision as well.
For sure. I feel like, I know it's kind of like a meme at this point, but I feel like storytelling is so important in whatever walk of life. If you can kind of take something that feels like big, ambiguous, something that doesn't seem like you can wrap your arms around it, but make it into a story, make it more concrete, make it something that people can rally behind. That's really that's the secret sauce in a lot of ways to get the best talent to get the right focus area, to prioritize on the right things. And I think a lot of those concepts are kind of part of what a leader needs to be doing in order to drive that strategy and the right execution.
Yep. And can you talk a little bit about your growth as a people leader as well? Did you make that switch at some point, or what was that decision like, whether to stay on that IC path or the individual contributor path versus start to manage people in addition to products?
I think like I got this advice from a mentor of mine, and she called it like a career lattice instead of a career ladder. And I really like that concept of you can move horizontally, you can move across, you can move up and down, but it doesn't have to be one way. It's just from like down to up. And so I kind of took people management in that same vein. And so I was an IC, then became a people manager, went back to IC for a little while, became a people manager again. I think it's like the pendulum kind of swings both ways for me. Yet when I'm people managing, it's like if the majority of my time is people management, then I get into these like, I don't know, I get these itches for building something. And so I'll spend a weekend with like one of the AI tools now that exist and just build something because I just want to be closer to that fulcrum of creation again. And then there's times where I'm like doing the IC work and I'm like, I can't write one more PRD. I want to like go help and coach somebody. And then I get the angel advising side to scratch that itch, I guess. So I think there's different ways to look at it. And I guess it's the idea of learning. It's really going back to that. It's really like, what is it that you need to learn as your next step, and not worry as much about this kind of career ladder that may or may not exist in the world, because it's just, you get promoted to what end, I guess. And so it's really about what is it that you want to learn in that next role? What is it that what opportunity do you want to have access to in the next thing or the thing after that? And so that's really like the goal setting that I usually tend to do.
And then in those moments where you found yourself in more of a people management role than a product management role, how did you sort of, as a product leader, you still have to care about product and you want to as well because you're passionate about execution, but how did you kind of balance that, the switch in mindset between like product strategy, execution, and people leadership?
Yeah, I think like in our industry, we value a lot more of like the product strategy execution piece, with probably people leadership coming in second. I think it's a world in which like you want to have folks that can roll up their sleeves, get into the dirt, really solve meaty problems. And so I do get that. I think there's something interesting about saying as an IC, you get promoted into people management, even if you have no people management experience or people management interests. And so I do think a lot of my time was spent more on that strategic and executional areas at the start. But honestly, over time, I think in order to grow teams that then build the best products, you need incredible people that are willing to join that vision and that rallying cry that you have. And so I'd say over time, I think I've come to realize that being decent at all three areas, like I guess strategy, execution, and leading people, is really important, and being able to coach them, give them enough space, but then micromanage as necessary to make sure things don't fall apart. It's definitely more of an art than a science, and I'm still learning every single day from a lot of folks on my team who are smarter than I am, and I think that's a very important like skill to have, but I don't think I recognize that in the early days, because startups need folks that can just build that strategy. Where are we going and how are we getting there?
Totally. Yeah. And, I think about this too, like even when I was leading teams before and as people were kind of like growing in their career, they often are thinking about like, oh, I want to become a leader. I want to become a people manager. I want to be there when decisions, are being made right around the business as well. I'm curious, like, how is that for you? Like, was there a moment when you were like, oh, I want to be in that room where the decision is being made? Like, what do I need to do to get there?
For sure. I do think there's this view of that, of like, yeah, I don't know if it's a Hamilton song or something, but you want to be in that room. And I think that there's like, it's almost, I don't know, it almost feels like it's the antithesis of what you think, where I had another mentor tell me, the more you get into the people management side, the further away from the center of the decision you are. Like as an IC, you're actually the one making a lot of the decisions. And the further removed you are, you're coaching and pushing folks, but you're not actually making the day-to-day decisions anymore, or you're not as close to those day-to-day decisions. And so I think it's being comfortable with knowing where you are in that level of like abstraction. And so one of the idea concepts that this mentor was telling me about was this could apply to angel investing or managing, but you might have a conversation sync with your team and you all see the same ingredients. You see chocolate, you see sugar, you see flour, you see butter and on the table, and you're like, okay, great, we're all talking about the same things. You walk away from that thinking this team's going to come back to me and they're going to make some amazing chocolate chip cookies. And they come back and they made fudge brownies. And you're like, wait, that's not what I thought we were going to do. And if it was in my hands, I would have made the cookies instead of the brownies. And so you kind of have to know where you want to push. Like, was it really the cookie that was important? Or was it that there was a dessert available? And using that analogy, like I kind of have to think about that a few times, because as an IC, you get to own all of it and you have to lose that control a little bit as you kind of manage folks and help grow your team, because they need to learn the same things of how to bake, but you don't want to take away the joy of baking because you're just in it with them all the time. And so I think there is something special about being in the room, but I don't think it's the decisions that you might think that are happening in that room at different points in your career. And I sometimes look back with rose-colored glasses and think about, it'd be really nice to IC today and get to.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had actually a friend just told me the other day she was presenting to her CEO of like a Fortune 500 company, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited! I'm going to finally see what these executive meetings are like." And she was like, "Wait, that was it?" So it's funny how sometimes it's like the same meetings, just different people. It's
Absolutely.
not this like mysterious, exciting, thing happening behind a curtain. So
Exactly.
well, so I know we talked a lot about your experience at Square, which was amazing. And it sounds like a lot of people would kill to have that experience. But it sounds like you're kind of doing it again with Mercury. Mercury is another great company that we see around all the time. We actually use it at the Council Fund, and many of our portfolio companies use it too. So I'd love to hear, how did you know it was time for a move and why Mercury?
Yeah. And so glad the Council Fund is a customer. If you know where to find me if you ever have any feedback on the
Amazing.
product. Well,
Watch
I
what you
think
ask for. Be careful what you ask for. I'm just
no, I
kidding.
love it. I
It's been
love it.
smooth so far.
I promise. Let's see. So I think my journey with Mercury I was actually a customer years before moving over to the company. And I have two LLCs. And so got to use the Mercury banking product before even considering them as something that I wanted to like move towards after Square. And I think I was even really small angel investor when they opened up their last round to all their
That's awesome.
customers. They did like that big SPV back then, I think. But yeah, so I was kind of a fan of the product, their cultural ethos to like celebrate their customers as being investors too, before meeting anyone on their team. And I think you can tell a lot about the product. And I use the product term very loosely, meaning like anyone who's working on building that business and the product, just based on like the attention to detail of the design, the care and craftsmanship of the engineering performance, and all of these key elements were just incredible to see. And it kind of took me back to those early Square days too, of like, oh yeah, there's something really magical about this experience of something that's so unsexy as fintech can be, but there's something really magical about how this product came to be. And then I think meeting the team at Mercury just made that decision pretty easy for me. Of like, it hit all those same things that I was looking for when I joined Square as well.
That's awesome. I actually have a funny story about this. It was a magical experience. So back when the First Republic and Silicon Valley Bank happened, we actually had all of our, our money with the Council Fund in First Republic. And so all of a sudden we were feeling, ooh, this is shifty. Where do we send all this money? We need another bank account. And so I actually went to like a brick and mortar bank. I'm not going to say which one. But I went there thinking, going in person will be the best way to set up a bank as fast as possible. And I got there and they were like, okay, we're going to need to schedule another appointment tomorrow. You're going to have to print out all these documents, come in tomorrow. And they kept asking me, who's the GP? And I kept saying, I'm the GP. They were like, where is he? And I was like, I am him. I'm
Wow.
the GP. And so anyways, I still, I went back, I got my documents, I brought them back and they set up a bank account, but then I was still waiting on them to process it and everything. So then I went home and I had seen Mercury everywhere and I was like, let me just try Mercury. I know I hear it's simple. It can't be possibly that simple, but I tried to start and set up a bank account and literally I was done in like 5 minutes. And they asked for all the same information. I still had to prove my identity, but I could do it, with my face looking into a camera, my ID. I uploaded all my documents. So it was just amazing just what the status quo was and then what Mercury was able to provide. And that's what you're saying. It's like a very unsexy industry, but that experience was very magical, especially back to
Yes.
back. So
Yes.
yeah, had to share that
Wow.
one.
I can't believe they asked who the GP was several
I know.
times.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
It was
awful.
comical.
Yeah. Man.
Especially as I'm frantically trying to figure out like where do I, move stuff. This is not what I
Right.
want to be dealing with right now.
Oof.
So yeah.
Well, I'm glad you had a good experience with Mercury's onboarding.
That's great. So curious, now you've been at Mercury for a little while now. What does your role look like there today? Like, what are you focused on?
Yeah. So we're focused on a lot at Mercury these days. There's just a lot to do, but my role is really focused on, I call it the next set of revenue drivers for Mercury. So the banking related products, like the bank accounts, our card products, have had several years to mature into the products they are now. But my team and I are working on the kind of our newest offerings, mostly in software and consumer. So our consumer product called Personal Mercury Personal launched actually around this time last year, launched in April last year. And then we also have a whole new suite of financial workflows. So a suite of software that sits on top of our core banking to help our customers manage their accounts payable, accounts receivable, spend controls, accounting workflows, and all of that. And so we've launched a set of products there, which I think they started in, I think bill pay, our bill pay product launched in May. Our invoicing product launched late in that summer in August. And then we had some new spend controls and employee reimbursements that launched in October. So we just had a back to back kind of like velocity of product launches that happened last year. And each subsequent launch kind of took less time from concept to launch. And so we've been really focused on like getting these things out there. This year is really focused on finding that product market fit within each one of these areas across our broad base of customers. And so it's really just like focused on what is the next set of, I guess, I don't like calling them bets because there's a lot of rigor that goes into why we chose these products, but these new areas of 0 to 1 and how do we drive growth in some of these new concepts of like what a bank should encapsulate from the beginning. Like if you were to wave a magic wand and start a digital bank offering now, it wouldn't look like what banking was for the last 50 years. And so how do we kind of rethink that and help build what our customers need?
Yeah, that's awesome. And just even building on that further, you've been through several iterations of tech. I mean, I've seen you've worked on fintech, you've worked on cloud infrastructure, and we're sitting in a really interesting moment right now with AI and everything happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious, what do you think is different about building now in fintech versus 5 to 10 years ago?
I think it's just the amount of possibilities that have been unleashed in the recent years. It's kind of incredible to see how quickly you can go from concept to reality. I don't know if you all have been playing around with some of these like AI prototyping tools
Yeah.
and things like that. It's incredible to me, especially having an engineering background and, coding in my past life to now going and just having like these conversational vibe coding type of interactions and using that within our internally as well. Like, can we take design time and cut it in half? Can we take the PRD writing process and cut it down because it now encapsulates so many more edge cases that we wouldn't have done if it was just a writing exercise, but now seeing it interacting with some sort of prototype, it makes it easier for us. I think that there's just a lot that fintech has been able to do in the past, even like if we just look at the past decade, there was a lot of new innovations in that last decade that were really about how do we take something that feels so old and kind of stagnating and use new kind of regulations or deregulations or new concepts within tech and software to make that better. But then in the last, I'd say 2 years, the AI like wave has really taken things into, okay, it's not just about how can you drive efficiencies in this process now, but how can you change the entire mode of the way you're operating and building these businesses? And I think that applies to fintech, but it also applies to really any business model out there. Infrastructure and like that back end area is just ripe for all of this. So I'm actually pretty excited to see what's going to happen in the next few years.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I think like for founders of all types, like in fintech, of course, but I'm sure you've probably seen this too, like with the founders that you've been working at through Transparent Collective as well. There's so much that they can like now have the opportunity to do because of the tools out there. I'm curious though, with all of your experience across these different founders and at Square and Mercury, if you've seen like a specific challenge that early operators might have underestimated.
That's an interesting question. I think, it's that typical kind of realization that a lot of maybe folks that have founded companies before, or have been doing working on their company for a long time. It's almost like if I knew what it would take, I would have never started it kind of an idea. And so I kind of think it's almost like there are going to be things that are in your blind spot, but it's probably a design, not a bug kind of, it's by design, not a bug type of a concept. Because I think if you know too much, you probably wouldn't have gone into a lot of the things, because it's just like constant. I mean, fintech is a great example of that. Like the regulation in this space is just constant, and things change, and it's just this barrage of things that you have to deal with that nobody will ever see. Nobody will ever understand, like from the customer standpoint, but you just have to kind of like have that grit and just keep taking each challenge down day by day, day by day. And so I think that's something that founders probably don't realize how much effort things might take, but maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah. And Rachel just kind of quickly mentioned Transparent Collective. It'd be great if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
I'd love to. Thank you. So Transparent Collective is a nonprofit that I founded with a friend. It helps underrepresented founders access resources and connections that they need to build successful tech companies. We've been operating for, oh my gosh, 9 years, 10 years.
Wow.
Sounds crazy to me, but
that's amazing.
it is.
Yeah,
We really do love it. We do like more educational programming for these founders. So we have founders fly in from all across the US. We'll have founders from really not the coast usually, but it's usually folks from like a Detroit or Atlanta or Baltimore. And we give them programming focused on helping them fundraise, connecting them to investors that can help, or just making those connections between high caliber entrepreneurs and investors happen, and then contributing to just an ecosystem where these types of founders can flourish. So it was really an ideal of how can we create a collective of people that transparently share information with one another in order to give them the tools that they need to have the right conversations, say things in the right way, have that context of what's going on, because venture for a lot of people is new, and they don't understand what it takes to think about a world in which you're selling equity rather than taking on debt. And so, yeah, we host webinars, we have workshops. We'll have about 8 to 10 founders join us in a week where we do all this mentoring, small group workshops, hands-on training with mentors and advisors and investors that we've worked with before. And I think to date we've had 90 alumni, more than 90 alumni across 11 batches. And I'm going to look at the data just to make sure. Yeah, 65% of our founders have raised venture funding, upwards of 125 million in early stage funding. It's been really fun to see how the growth has happened, and some of our companies have been acquired. Of course, some also just shut down, but it's been really nice to just kind of have this group that, folks will come back and say, Transparent Collective was the reason I was able to raise. And it's
that's amazing.
It's great. Yeah. It's great to see more women in the space. It's great to see more underrepresented folks in the space, and, creating a different generation of wealth across different types of people.
Yeah. And I love that theme of transparency, just because it is, I think because it's such a relationships driven business and founders are moving so fast, oftentimes, whether intentional or not, there's a lot of gatekeeping. And
Exactly.
like if you're in, you're in. If you know the talk, you know the talk. But if you don't kind of know that style,
That's
just
exactly
kind of hits you across the face. You don't
Yes.
even know it hit you. So yeah,
Yes.
that's really amazing. You're kind of helping them sprint ahead through that first
I appreciate it.
chapter that tends to be hard for a lot of founders, probably outside of the coast. So yeah.
Yes, it's definitely like, yeah, you're right. If you know type of shorthand that happens, and a West Coast investor is going to have a different shorthand than an East Coast investor. And we were around during the #MeToo movement. And so there was also that transparency of like, which investor have I heard you shouldn't go to dinner with, or maybe bring your co-founder or something like that. And so it's been really interesting to see in this last decade what transparency really meant and what mattered.
It's awesome.
Yeah. And I'm curious too. I mean, like, you've seen so many founders go through that, and obviously you've, been an angel investor yourself. Is there a specific kind of like quality that you really look for in founders that you want to back yourself or advise?
I think I'm maybe pretty biased on this, but I feel like having founders that have the product manager quality to them, meaning like they know their customers and they know their customers' pains really well, like to a deep level. They care about what they're building and how precise that their solution is, and they have a depth of understanding in that area. And then I think the other pieces that really are just kind of like, need to have, but you don't really know how to maybe assess it until you've done a few of these founder calls. But they have to be excited. I can't drive that excitement for them about this opportunity space. I need to see that they're really bullish on where they're going to spend the next several years of their lives if this does well. It takes a lot of internal momentum to make sure that drive is there every single day in, day out, as all of this stuff that happens. And I guess to that, the second thing I always look at is trying to figure out if they have that right attitude and grit to be an entrepreneur, because can take you down pretty fast if you don't have that mindset of, that optimistic level with also being realistic about your challenges. It's a really hard balance to strike. And so I think those are maybe the skills, but then also the types of founders that I like. If I can find that, or if I can tell that, I'm excited about backing them.
That's awesome. And not to put you on the spot, but would you ever be a founder yourself? Or have you ever thought about it?
I mean, never say
And by the
never.
way, you have been a founder. I saw on your LinkedIn that you had launched a food store in
Did.
Chicago. So
Did.
you are
Yeah.
in Transparent Collective. So you are a founder. But curious if you'd ever
Fair.
do a startup.
Right. Yeah. I mean, maybe is, I guess, the right answer there. I think there's a certain point, like maybe to my earlier answer of ignorance is bliss. I might know too much now,
Yeah, fair.
where it scares me enough where I'm like, oh, it's something that if I got an idea where I do feel like I could absolutely spend the next decade of my life plus working on this, then absolutely. But it's a very high bar to me to say, like, how am I going to think about this? Is this something that I would want to go do for the next chapter?
Yeah, that's a really good lens too. I think some people go into it saying, I just want to be a founder and I'm going to find the right idea and then I'm going to go build it. But I think it's much better to have the idea first, know that it's the right time, right market, and then go all in.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
appreciate that mentality.
Yeah. I think it's also like it's one of those things, just like a PM maybe, but I think a lot of people think of it as a pyramid where you're kind of at this top level by being, the product decider or the CEO, where I think it's an inverted pyramid and people don't realize it because all of the stuff rolls downhill to you and you are responsible for a lot. And so, be ready to take that on your shoulders and know what it comes with to say that you're going to be a founder.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's really great advice for any founders out there listening. But curious too, like, do you have advice that you find yourself repeating, especially since you've mentored and worked with so many founders and early stage operators as well? Curious if there's anything that you're like, early stage builders really need to internalize this.
I think probably 2 pieces of advice. One is focus on your mental health. That maybe not surprisingly, but that is something that I think I get more calls about than anything else. It's just founders want to talk, they want to vent, they want to discuss, like, I'm so stressed out, I don't know what to do. And it's not about the actual business decision at hand or something like that. It's just the amount that you take on is significant. And so make sure that you have the right channels, the right support system, the right mental attitude of how to take some of that stuff on, because it's a lot. And so I think maybe the more of what I do is more on that like therapist lens versus an actual advising lens. So I think that's one piece of advice, is just be really aware of your support systems. And then I think the second is probably the thing that I get pinged most about is I want to hire my first PM. And is this the right time? It's usually, my answer is usually no. It's usually way too early. I mean, an example is Mercury only hired its first PM maybe 2 years ago. So it's been a very, like, it was late for them. They actually, I think Ahmad once tweeted about how they were pretty proud that they didn't have any PMs at the company for a very long time. And so I think that's probably, maybe they waited a bit too long, but I do think waiting for a while is the right advice, because you as a founder, you as that early operator are the PM. You should know that customer the best. You should know what you're building. You should know the priorities of why you're building those things and how it's being built by the engineering team and the design team and all of that. So giving that up too early it feels like it's too many chefs in the kitchen, not even cooks. You're like 2 chefs trying to make this menu doesn't make any sense. And so you need one person to really own that. And I think it should be the founder for very long.
And just building on that, knowing that founders and early builders often need to kind of shoulder that responsibility, how should they, during that period of time, like how should they shift product strategy, or even they're thinking about product strategy as the company is kind of growing through different stages? Because I mean, at inception, it looks a lot different than when you're trying to optimize for, existing customer base and things like that. So we'd just love to hear about how you think through, any sort of advice you give to founders and early builders around that.
I think it's maybe there's like, when do you have something to lose? When you're really early stage, or it's like maybe 2 of you and you're just trying to build something, try a lot of things, build, rebuild, embrace the chaos almost at that stage of it. But then I think, once you like, you're you're obviously, as a founder, the closest to your product, closest to your customers. But then when things seem to be stalling without you, like you become the bottleneck, that might be a good time to start thinking about that scale. Or when people other than you are really doing the PM work, but just not, you're not calling them PMs, like the designers or engineers are actually writing some product requirements. I guess when you need to kind of like scale your decision making, manage multiple hats of like cross team coordination, getting work done from start to finish, those are really good indications of that scale that you're experiencing. And then I think, I mean, an example with Mercury was we were moving into different adjacent surface areas with our product. And so we had different kinds of customers, different kinds of segments that we needed to think about in this multi-product world. And that became a really good impetus for making those hires.
Yeah. I guess, since you've worked with so many teams, do you agree that like you could have a really great product, but if you don't have the right team to execute, it won't succeed? Curious about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in that boat of like, I absolutely believe it's a people thing rather than, I think like there's times where you can see a product doing well in spite of the people that are building it. But I think those are very few and far between in my book. And I think it's really, even when you think about like how do you invest in companies, I always go after, especially at the early stage, I'm like, I'm backing the founder, not the idea, because the ideas change, the product changes, the business could change, especially when there's waves like the AI wave that we're going through right now. People have to be quick and pivot and be ready to go with all of the work that they've put in, just ride certain waves really well. And so I do think it takes the right team to build something incredible. And I always back that the team and the founders and their abilities rather than the concept, because I feel like most products, most concepts can be replicated at the very core of it. There's nothing proprietary about that. So you need talented individuals to make something amazing.
Yeah. And last kind of tactical question that we'll ask, I'm curious, what are some of the top attributes that you've looked for in that first PM, and when is typically the right time to hire them, would you say?
I think it's, I feel like I look for folks that have a lot of that founder mentality or experience. We do we do hire a bunch of ex-founders into Mercury's PM positions. Yeah, I feel like
We have a lot of product managers turned founders in our portfolio.
Yes.
It's just natural.
Yes. Yeah, it is, because you're doing, it's a very similar job. And when I look at resumes, I look at founding experience as equivalent to years of PMing experience, because you're kind of doing everything under the sun. You're just working to make everything kind of fit together and work. And you're thinking about strategically where you need to be. You need to also maintain execution velocity in complex areas and work with engineers and designers to make something happen. And so I think there's a lot of overlap with the way that I kind of think about what makes it an excellent PM is just, I never have to worry that the right decision is being made and the work is getting done. I think there's probably maybe this is more of an example of, to put rigor into the decision, the hiring decision, is that a lot of founders, trust their gut sense, but I think there's a lot more failed startups than successful ones. So there's a ton of confirmation bias baked into that intuition, and just something to like, as you're evaluating founders in these roles, that's probably something to just, we have a humility check and low ego check, and it's kind of part and parcel of this idea. And then I completely forgot the second part of this question. But that's what I look for.
Time to hire them.
Well, yeah, I think that goes back to kind of like what I was mentioning about when you can't scale yourself, or when you're feeling like you're the bottleneck and other people are kind of doing that job. I think that's really like, these are the considerations that feel like, oh yeah, there's something that I need to fix here and I can't do it myself anymore. And so that's when the hiring becomes really important.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Well, let's switch over to our quick fire round. Okay, so we'll just ask some questions and just feel free to say the first thing that comes to mind.
All right.
First one, best book or resource for early builders?
Okay. This one, I think this isn't like a typical answer probably, but I'm reading this book right now called Letting Go, and it's about non-attachment theory. And it's really like this mentality that is kind of interesting to me. It mixes in psychology plus philosophy into an interesting way of kind of thinking about how you react to situations, like where the emotional self is versus where the actual conscious self is. And it's very metaphysical, so I will say that. But I do think these kinds of topics are probably the most important for early builders, is like really thinking about who you are and why you are striving for the thing that you're building right now. So not a real like kind of resource in terms of a class or something, but I think it's important.
It's great.
Most underrated skill for an early team member?
I mean, I don't know if it's underrated, but it's this idea of just do it. I think early team members just need to have no fear and need to look at a problem, say, I have no idea how to do that, but I'm going to figure it out. And that's what you really need from those early generalists. Really sharp, smart people that don't worry about doing it the right way or the academic way.
And what's a misconception about early product leaders that you wish more people understood?
I think you think about like startups and this whole idea of move fast and break things kind of assumption that people have. And I really think that truly is one of the biggest misconceptions to me, or maybe the thing that hurts me the most, is that this idea that these early product folks have no rigor in how they do and prioritize their work. There's just actually a lot that goes into decisions that might seem a little bit off the wall or out of nowhere, but there's a lot of work that we do to get to there. I mean, I would say like our PM team has probably 30 to 50 customer interviews every single quarter. We go through a lot of data. We put together a synthesis of everything that we're kind of thinking and how we're thinking about it. And there is a time and place to just like try things out. But there's also, I think the majority of our time has a lot of like rigorous analytics and debates and challenges that come with it.
That's great. What's a piece of startup advice that's actually bad?
Can I reuse one that I was just thinking of? Which was like the idea of this like gut sense. I'm going to not call it founder mode, but I'm going to call it gut sense of, the founder has this innate ability to kind of just know what the next step is. And I think there is that confirmation bias to some of those things, and not having an answer or just because I'm a founder, this is what I want, I think it's terrible advice. And I don't think that's what the founder mode idea and the concept that Brian Chesky was talking about even meant, but I think a lot of people took it as that in the industry. So I think it's really this idea of like, yes, as a founder, I respect and trust their opinions. There must be something there as to why they're saying that, but you then have to come back and be able to answer those questions. Otherwise, it's not just go do it because I said so. And so I think that breeds the right culture within your company and has this aspect of like pushback is fine, but we both have to come with our homework being done.
Awesome. And what's something inexpensive in your house that's improved your day-to-day?
Okay. So I have this on my desk, which is
have it here.
Ember mug. Can you see? My background is.
Oh yeah.
Oh, nice.
Have you guys tried this? It is.
I've seen it, but I haven't tried.
It's for a tea drinker like me who just is in meetings back to back to back, and my tea gets cold, but I can't go warm it up because I'm in meetings all day. It is life-changing. I'm just like, every sip, it's still warm. I was like, oh, this is great.
I'm going to have to get one.
Highly recommend.
No, I'm a tea drinker also, so I'm adding that to my list now.
Yes, it is kind of wild how I'm like, is this still good? Is this okay for me to be drinking? Because it's hours later.
Awesome. Cool. Well, usually what we like to ask at the very end is playing a really quick game of Builder's Wishes. If you had a magic wand, what's one wish you would make for yourself as a leader, for Mercury, and then third for like the future of banking or fintech?
Ooh, I'd probably say it's a wish for myself is to just be as beginner's mindset as possible. Sometimes it gets hard in a given field to come back and challenge those assumptions. And so especially as a leader, I just want to, be first principled about things, make good decisions, and grow an incredible team. So I think that's probably what I would wish for is to make sure that I constantly have that reminder. I think Mercury in the future of banking is just making our customers' lives as easy as possible and taking away a lot of the unnecessary elements in a lot of these spaces that make work hard. We serve a lot of business owners, and nobody wants to go and spend, like Amber said, 3 hours at a brick and mortar place just to get something that should be back office and just work happen. And so I think like as much as we can, I want to push for the new evolution of banking at Mercury.
Awesome. And where can people follow your work and learn more about Mercury and Transparent Collective?
Yeah. So I'm on, I guess it's called X now, Rohini P. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can hit me up there, although I'm terrible with LinkedIn messages. So maybe Twitter or X is easier. And then transparentcollective.com and mercury.com. So would love folks to reach out anytime.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Rohini, thank you so much for joining us today. Really
Absolutely.
Appreciate
it. Yeah, this has been
Thank
awesome.
you.
Really appreciate it. It's awesome to see you too.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Rachel, what stood out to you most in our conversation with Rohini?
For me, I think what I resonated with was just her people leadership, her ability to coach and to guide her team. I think coming from leading a customer success team at Komodo, I think seeing how she really prioritized her team, her vision, scaling herself as that leader was really, what was really resonating for me as well.
Yeah. And I think she did it in a way too where she had credibility, because there's actually nothing worse than a manager asking you to do something they don't understand, or not even trying to do something before they hand something off to a cross-functional partner. But it was cool that she kind of had that credibility as she was coming up the ranks, because she really spent some time in different roles. And I think that led into my main takeaway, which was kind of breadth and depth. It seems like she's taken that approach to multiple things throughout her own career, as well as advice that she gives to founders today and as companies are growing. So it seems like early career, she kind of took this approach of, let me throw pasta at the wall, see what sticks, see what I like, see what I'm learn as much as possible. And then as soon as there was almost like diminishing returns of doing everything, or she saw a lot of value in doing one thing, she would focus in on that and then go really deep on it. And that's kind of how she landed in product, landed in fintech. And it seems like she has that same advice for, like, when do you hire your first product manager? When do you know to shift your mindset and how you build product and strategy? So I just like that she has that ability to almost zoom in and then step back. And even at the end, she was saying that that's one of the wishes she has for herself, is just the ability to constantly step back and make sure she has all the right details. So I think that sort of constant learning mentality, but also knowing when it's time to focus, is so rare in people and really valuable. So that really stuck out to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, one of the things that when you were talking about the credibility as well, like in her ability to lead that team, building that foundation, right? Like having all that generalist approach and taking the roles like in customer support, where now as a product leader, she can say, hey, this is what I think we should do. She's not looking at it from an ivory tower perspective. It's because she's actually done it herself. So really, really love that customer first focus as well.
Yeah, and it seems like she has a servant leader sort of mentality, like even how she was describing that triangle, like being inverted. You're, like you said, you're not, in this ivory tower at the top, just flowing down information to everyone and all of your minions to do everything for you. But instead, you're kind of this facilitator at the end that has to take needs from the market, needs from the team, all these external inputs, and make sure that they're coming together in a thoughtful way. So I just love that mentality. It seems like throughout, she just has a lot of humility and, but also like extremely credible and knows her stuff. So I like that combo a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. She's definitely someone, just in the hour that we were chatting with her, someone that I would love to, work for, right? Like just
Totally.
how she approaches things.
Yeah. And that's, as you know, like so much about what we look for at the council. We like to work with founders and first builders turned founders that are the sort of people you'd want to work with, want to work for. They have that sort of customer focus. They have that ability to step back and see the forest through the trees. And they're also humble enough, but they're also confident enough. So, it was really interesting to see that in her and a lot of the founders she targets as well. So anyways, for anybody listening, if you love this episode, subscribe to First Builders, share it with a fellow builder, and let us know who you want to hear on here next.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay tuned for our next episode and don't miss it.
Yep, we're releasing these weekly now, so excited.